Natasha Trethewey's Native Guard is about personal, national, regional history, all kinds of struggling with the past. What I want to direct your attention to is her place in literary tradition, the other side of it in literary history, and where she is as a practicing poet in a poetic tradition. I want to talk about her use of form, poetic form, and what she does with it, and direct as something for us to think about in the next couple of weeks as we discuss her. Talking about the content is obviously what any poet wants us to do. They want the content to matter, but we should also think about form and style, not the raw material she uses, but what she makes of it, because we do not get the experience of Trethewey's extremely troubled and in other ways rich personal history. Um, from the book, we get Trethewey's art. So I'd like to talk about her not as a person undergoing experiences, not as a character in her poems, but as an artist. She is a second generation poet. Her father is actually not only a publishing poet, but a Cleveland State Poetry Center poet. If you next time when the Poetry Center does reopen, you can see Eric Trethewey's books on the shelves there. We published one of his books back in the day. I say this not to give Trethewey's father credit necessarily or take away. Natasha is clearly a much more successful poet than Eric. Well, Trethewey is not her father, is the one who has the Pulitzer Prize for this book. But I want to say that she doesn't come from nowhere. She's someone who's sophisticated and educated in poetic form and tradition. She has an MFA. She studied for a PhD in kind of cultural studies, and then moved on to just be a poet. Um, she studied under poets who are actually much less more formally risky in certain ways. People like James Tate, who's sometimes in the considered part of the language poetry movement, people like Dara Weir and Martina Spada, her mentors during her MFA program. These poets are actually tend to be much wilder in form. Trethewey's poems, the poems in Native Guard, are relatively, and I stress the word relatively, formal. She's using a lot of inherited poetic forms from earlier traditions. What she's not doing is doing them completely on the nose. They're often modified or muted. Um, she will do a revision of the sonnet form, but not the full rhyme of the sonnet form. She will use rhyme, but her rhyme schemes don't tend to be as on the nose, as clear as formal. There's a less formal closure. And here she has the luxury of inheriting a large body of poetic experimentation and poetic form and being able to do a kind of softer, rounded edge version of that. But it is always a core artistic choice what form she's going to put a particular set of words into. And these poems have sometimes very visible structures. Um, as I asked you in your scavenger hunt, look for those poetic forms and structures. They're there. They're undeniably there.